Does crypto have any value at all? Why are people so excited about Bitcoin? Should you be buying Bitcoin? Class, let's spend today digging a little deeper into value. I want to start today's discussion by looking at a well-known quote by a famous economist trying to predict what will have value in the future. Let's pull up Paul Krugman, a Nobel laureate in economics, and look at what he has to say in 1998 about the internet and its future value. By 2005 or so, it will become clear that the internet's impact on the economy has been no greater than the fax machines. I think today we can look back on this quote and laugh. Certainly the economy is almost dominated by the internet. Think about all the value flowing through the internet today. Even social media, this very platform, there's advertisements occurring. Your data is being collected. It's being sold to companies so that way they could sell you products. Now, when the internet first arrived on the scene, let's talk about mid-1990s, most people were focused on email, and they thought email was the big use case of the internet. Now, of course, email is a use case, but the internet goes well beyond email. We are in a similar time today with crypto, and Bitcoin is kind of like the email of crypto. So when you're watching those talking heads on the nightly news, and they're telling you about what may or may not have value, where you should put your money, where will capital flow, always be a little skeptical. Always be a little skeptical. Let's take a pointer from Richard Feynman, another great quote. Science is the belief in the ignorance of the experts. So have a little skepticism, you guys, when considering viewpoints pushed by so-called experts. Often, in the frontiers of any various discipline, the experts, in fact, are entrenched in old ideas, and hence they're not the best at forecasting the future. And hence, Paul Krugman maybe wasn't able to see where value was going to flow when it comes to the internet. Class, let's continue this story, and let's dive in to thinking about the value of art. And I want to bring up one of my favorite artists, William Blake. William Blake, when he was alive, was a cobbler. He fixed shoes. Today, William Blake is studied in all universities throughout the world as a famous transcendentalist. And the words of William Blake really bring me a lot of value. Let me bring up an excerpt from William Blake's The Marriage of Heaven and Hell. And these are well-known proverbs, the so-called Proverbs of Hell. And I like these because they're very, maybe counterintuitive. Like the following: the road of excess leads to the palace of wisdom. Dip him in the river who loves water. A fool sees not the same tree that a wise man sees. I love these little nuggets of wisdom, and they bring me a lot of value. But in the time of William Blake, when he was alive, people did not celebrate him. He was not famous. And so the notion of value has a temporal, a time component. It may change over time. And so we can see what was not valued at once in the past maybe become very valued at some point in the future with this particular artist, William Blake. If you're a fan of William Blake, I suggest you guys go ahead and find Khalil Gibran, and his most famous work is The Prophet. I love this book, The Prophet. Stories of wisdom. I felt that Khalil Gibran was reaching across space and time, and he was reading the words that were etched on my heart. How did he do that? How could I feel so connected? I place a lot of value on The Prophet because reading those words lets me feel not so alone in my own struggles of life. Value is often inextricably connected to money and capital. If you want a deeper dive on these ideas and how they evolved through history, I suggest this wonderful book, Debt, the First 5,000 Years. And it presents a different view of how value, economy, capital, relationships, financial relationships have evolved over time. This is a great read, you guys. Or if you're like me, get it on an audiobook if you don't have time to read. Continuing on our discussion of value in art, there are some clever ways that people have thought about putting value to art. Let's go to Paris. Vive Paris and the Louvre. The Louvre is the most famous museum in the world, and each day there are some 25,000 visitors going to the Louvre. Many of these visitors are intent on seeing a very famous piece of art, the Mona Lisa. Now, the Mona Lisa, as far as I'm concerned, is kind of ugly, it's small, and it's really not that impressive. But people place a lot of value on the Mona Lisa. The artist is very famous, and you might ask yourself, why is that artist famous? For the painting. But the painting is famous because it was produced by an artist. Of those 25,000 visitors that go to the Louvre daily, many, some estimates saying 80% are intent on seeing one particular piece of art, the Mona Lisa. I think the Mona Lisa is pretty meh. It's small, it's kind of ugly, it doesn't really do much for me. But we can place some interesting ideas of value on the Mona Lisa. To enter the Louvre daily, an adult pass is around 30 euros. There are some 25,000 people entering each day, so that works into the hundreds of thousands of dollars, where a lot of that money coming into the Louvre is associated with people going to see the Mona Lisa. So you might say, well, the Mona Lisa is not just a piece of art. It actually produces an income for the Louvre daily. This can be true of really any piece of art. You can think about this in terms of national parks as well. A lot of national parks provide an aesthetic beauty that people love to experience. So we're digging a little deeper and seeing even art, things that have just pure beauty, can generate an income. So William Blake was not valued during his lifetime, yet we value him today. I wonder if Kanye West was transported to another time, would he and his music have the same value that we place on it today? Maybe not. So value has this interesting time component that can fluctuate. So it's not set in stone. It can go up, it can go down. Speaking of that time component, you maybe need to buy a new car. And you value that car more than you value the cash in your checking account. So you are going to undergo a financial interaction with the car dealership. They're going to give you a car today which you value highly, and in return, they will slowly get a drip feed of money from your bank account through the future. So there's an interesting exchange of value. You get a large chunk of value today, and they get a slow, ever-increasing pocket of value through the future. Jumping into crypto, crypto is filled with memes, and I love a good meme. Let me tell you about an old meme you might not have heard about, the meme Bitbean. It's fun to even say Bitbean. It rolls off the tongue there. Bitbean, also known as Bean Cash, was a well-known meme that in the 2017 crypto bull run, its value went through the roof. Let's take a look at a couple charts here. And this first chart is a zoomed out chart showing the US dollar price of Bitbean. And it looks pretty flat. There's a couple bumps. I was honestly surprised when I saw this bump in 2024. But I'm not interested in that. If we look back at 2017, there's hardly anything we can see there. Let's zoom in. If we zoom in, we can see Bitbean's value increased something like 1,000-fold over a very short time. And to be sure, it then went away in another very short time. But if you bought Bitbean and sold Bitbean at the right time, you could have made a lot of money. Why were people buying Bitbean? You can think of Bitbean and all of these memes as another piece of art. And why do people value particular memes? It's like a social contagion. Whatever is in the zeitgeist at the time, whatever is in the mind share of the populace, tends to go up in value. We saw this more recently in 2021 with Doge. Everybody was talking about Dogecoin. And of course, Elon Musk made Doge very, very famous. He even talked about it on Saturday Night Live. We're soon entering what appears to be another bull market in crypto, you guys. And so I'm going to go ahead and make a call that memes, once again, are going to increase in value. Now, only some of them, most will not. In fact, I'd say 99.99% of them will not. And even if they do increase in value, just like Bitbean, they're probably going to go up fast and go down just as fast. I would advise you to be very, very careful if you're going to invest in any kind of meme. Only use money that you expect to lose. In the more recent time frame of 2024, there was another meme that came onto the scene, and that meme is called Pepe. You might know Pepe, a very famous meme, and I had a pretty good inkling. I had some intuition that Pepe was going to do well as a meme coin. Why do I say that? Well, literally years before Pepe became this crypto token, I remember in 2016, Hillary Clinton, during the presidential election, she said that Pepe was a meme of the alt-right. It was a racist meme, so there's an interesting sort of charge surrounding it. Meanwhile, in Asian countries, Pepe was a celebrated figure, and people used him in protests against the CCCP. And so Pepe is maybe whatever you want it to be. I think people project sometimes their own internal world onto the external world, even Pepe. A few years later, around 2018, I remember students in my classroom were drawing Pepes on the whiteboard during lunch, trying to create these so-called rarest of Pepes. I didn't think much about it then, but when Pepe token came on the scene in 2024, I thought there's something here that has the right sort of je ne sais quoi, that this meme is going to take off. And it sure did. So I bought some Pepe early, and I hung on to it, and I sold a bunch after it went up 7x. 700% increase, I sold some. And so if I was going to give you any advice, and you probably shouldn't listen to me, if you buy a meme coin and you get it to go up maybe 2-3 times your initial value, probably take out the initial value you put in. That way, any further increase in price is pure profit. And you'll have no worries then. Highly risky financial instrument, any meme coin. That brings us finally to Bitcoin. Bitcoin was invented in 2008, and it solves some very interesting problems with digital cash. People have been working on digital cash for a while, but there are certain game theory problems to address with a distributed ledger. I suggest you go and see a video by 3 Blue, 1 Brown. It is the best video that I have seen on Bitcoin today. It explains all the ins and outs of this distributed ledger. It's a little bit complicated. The original white paper for Bitcoin describes Bitcoin as a peer-to-peer electronic cash. It can still operate like that today, but I would say that idea has evolved. Most people consider Bitcoin a store of value. Store of value. Well, what exactly does that mean? Historically, gold has been this typical store of value of choice. Now, gold has been mined for a long time, and I've heard estimates that the amount of gold available to humans that's been mined, it increases at about 2% every year. I'm sure there's fluctuation to that. I've heard stories. That is why the Fed tries to target a 2% inflation as they consider setting interest rates. Now, you can argue about that in the comments. I'd love to hear more. Gold, most gold is simply like art. Only a small percentage is used in industrial cases, something like 10%. The vast majority of gold is used in jewelry and effectively art because people like it. There are also simply large bars of gold, maybe in Fort Knox. We'll see if we get that audit. So if you buy gold, what you're hoping is that as the US dollar of other assets fluctuates here and there, gold will always have some set value or a value that ideally slowly increases over time, right, to keep pace with inflation. But does gold have intrinsic value compared to Bitcoin? I always laugh when I hear the idea of intrinsic value. And we're getting to the crux of the issue. Value is a social construct. Period. That is it across the board. What has value? Those things that people decide have value. And really, as a society, that's true. When you're going to the car dealership to buy that car, you might actually spend more money than someone else. You value it more highly. Maybe it is the right color. It has the right options that are just for you. So are you wrong in spending more money? No. Value is a social construct. So Bitcoin is very much like gold. People call Bitcoin a digital gold, and it has some properties maybe even better than gold. Gold can be confiscated, and the US government in the past, in fact, did confiscate personally held gold. Whereas Bitcoin sits in the abstraction of the digital ether, if you will. It sits on a blockchain, and it really cannot be, I'll say, easily confiscated in the same way that gold can. It is also a finite instrument. There are 21 million Bitcoins, and that is all that will ever be produced. Gold, in a sense, is almost infinite. Now, you might say on Earth there's a finite amount, but what if we start mining asteroids? What if we go to Mars? We may find more gold, whereas Bitcoin is a limited asset. Should you buy Bitcoin? Does crypto have any intrinsic value? Value, class, is a social construct. And so when you're considering where you place your value, keep this idea in mind. Class dismissed.